Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dave Hutchinson, and this is a WattsNewz podcast. Today's topic is how to build a microgrid, a big one. 7 years ago, Gallaudet University embarked on their journey to build a microgrid for their massive campus in Washington, D.C. And after going live in January, they've already saved over $1 million in electricity costs and have even begun selling their surplus power to the neighboring community. My guests today are the key leaders and architects behind this project, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with David Good of Gallaudet University. David?
Hey, Dave. Thanks. Dave Good. I am the director of energy utilities and sustainability at Gallaudet University. For those of you who are not familiar with Gallaudet, we are a small liberal arts college located in the heart of DC, about a mile north of the Capitol. And we have the distinction of being maybe the only university in the world that's really focused on educating deaf and hard of hearing students. And so, like a lot of um, small universities, we are, constantly trying to figure out how can we do, more? How can we meet our mission, our very important mission, with a limited budget, right? And so, the microgrid project, which we'll talk more about, was a great project to help us do that, as well as meet a lot of our other goals around what we're trying to accomplish at Gallaudet.
Great. And we've got a couple of our esteemed colleagues here. We'll go around the horn real quick. You want to start, Bracken? Name, rank, and serial number, and what you guys do,
Sure,
and your role here
sure.
with the project.
Great. I'm Bracken Hendricks. I'm a co-founder of a company called Urban Ingenuity. We're a small local business in Washington, D.C. We built an energy financing program for the District of Columbia and worked closely with Dave and the Gallaudet team as an owner's representative, helping them understand the technological opportunity and the financial opportunity, and then turn it into an investable project. So we've, myself and Shalom Flank, who is our microgrid architect, really deserves central credit in this, in the celebration of this project. We worked closely hand in hand with Dave Good from the early conception through the contractual engagement of partners, through the commitment of the university to see this project through, and all the way through to the implementation. And Shalom is still helping optimize the operations of the equipment today.
Excellent. Spencer?
Yeah, so I'm Spencer Bernstein, the Senior Director of Client Success at Scale Microgrids. That basically entails operating, maintaining, and optimizing the system for all of our clients, specifically at Gallaudet University. Scale Microgrids was the developer, engineer, and constructed and then commissioned the microgrid in tandem with Gallaudet University and Urban Ingenuity. And Scale Microgrids now operates and maintains and optimizes the system for Gallaudet.
Awesome. We were talking briefly before we started the podcast. A lot of discussion about microgrids, large and small. It's exciting stuff. As I mentioned in the intro, you guys built a big one. David, you got to set the scene for me here, because I'm imagining 7 years ago, you're at your desk minding your own business, and there's a knock on the door, and they come in and say, "Dave, we need a microgrid." Right? Just give us
Uh,
a little bit of a feeling for that day, and kind of how did it all get started?
so just to clarify, 7 years ago was kind of when we started our partnership with Scale Microgrids, right?
Okay.
So, and it was actually several years before that. When I started with Gallaudet in 2015, and really shortly after I started at Gallaudet, one of my primary responsibilities, right, is to figure out how can we reduce the utility expense at Gallaudet, right? Utility expenses behind salaries, right? Expenses are really kind of the biggest operational expense at Gallaudet and at a lot of universities, right? And so we're looking at ways that we could address that, bring those costs down, while also allowing us to do some other things we wanted to do around community benefits and being better environmental stewards. Led us to this idea that having distributed energy resources on campus, right, having our own generation on campus, it was potentially a really, really smart thing to do for a number of reasons. And so this was back in sort of in 2015. We started thinking about this in early 2016. We reached out and looked for a partner that could really help us kind of think through that. And that's where our partnership with Urban Ingenuity really started in 2016. And so as Bracken was saying, Shalom Flonk and Bracken came in, and they were already doing some work with the DC Department of Energy and Environment, where they were looking at sort of the feasibility of microgrids across the district. And so that work, they were sort of able to leverage that work and really in a pretty low cost way, do sort of a proof of concept analysis of whether or not a microgrid Gallaudet was economically feasible, whether it was it could be engineering wise, was it feasible, and then kind of most importantly almost was regulatorily, what could we do in the district, right? And one of the great things, and one of the reasons why this project works in DC is because the District of Columbia has some of the most favorable regulations and programs around distributed energy resources, especially solar. We have probably, I think, and Spencer might be able to answer, or Bracken might be able to confirm this, but I think we still have the most valuable renewable energy certificate market in the country for solar, which makes solar projects incredibly valuable. So we sort of knew really quickly that solar was something we really wanted to do because it could provide a lot of economic benefits to the university. And then being a large university, right, we also have a central plant, and a central plant where all our heating and cooling for most of our buildings on campus, about 2 million square feet, comes from that building, right, through steam boilers and electric chillers. And so that is also the building. Our central utility plant is also where our central point of connection to the utility is, right? And so for a microgrid, those are really important things, right? Especially having that central connection to the utility. And so Shalom and Bracken and his team were able to sort of look at all the different pieces, answer those questions. We were in I guess 2018 or 2017. We basically said, okay, this is a real project, right? Like we should go forward with this. Took a really methodical approach, did an RFQ, went out and solicited responses to see who was interested, who was qualified, and then from there did an RFP. And once again in 2019, we finally selected Scale Microgrids as our partner on the project. Yeah, a very long. It's been a long road to get where we are today. But I will say, just going back to sort of the benefits of the microgrid. Certainly, number one is from an economic perspective, right? That we're saving a ton of money on our utility costs. We were also, through this project, we were also able to address a lot of deferred maintenance, whether it was old roofs that needed to be replaced, whether it was we had 40-plus-year-old electric switchgear that we were having a hard time finding parts for, right? But through this project, we were able to get that replaced with brand new equipment. So that was a huge, from a capital perspective, a huge benefit of the project. And then there are also some revenues that come around. Some revenues with the community solar, and some revenues with our partnership with Scale, and using our battery, which Spencer can talk a little bit more about the specific components, using our battery to get revenue. So from an economics perspective, it's a really attractive project, and I think hopefully Gallaudet is like a model of kind of how to do one of these projects in a holistic way. It's not easy by any stretch, and we can go into some of the lessons learned and the challenges. But that, from the economics perspective, it was great. I think we also should mention we're a university, right? And we educate kids, and so having the ability to educate kids about clean electricity, right, is a huge benefit. Having this right on campus, and so Scale Microgrids was able to hire an intern this summer, right? So just incredibly great experience for students on campus, and we're trying to incorporate the microgrid into other things on campus as well from an educational perspective. The other part of a microgrid, which we talk about often, is resiliency, right? This is very hard to quantify as far as what is the value of resiliency if we lose the utility. connection, because it doesn't happen very often, right? But we expect, given the stress, the increased stress on the grid, that it's going to happen more often, right, going forward. So we expect the resiliency benefits to be huge at some point, but those are a little bit harder to quantify. And then the community, we talked a little bit about the community benefits, the fact that all of the solar, all of the solar that's generated, all the electricity that's generated from the solar is put into a community solar program. And any resident within the District of Columbia can subscribe to Gallaudet's array and get a 10% discount on their utility bill, right? So that's a great community benefit. Then there's also some community benefits potentially around, if there is a big outage, Gallaudet can island, right? We can basically maintain power to all of our campus. So that will be a place where people can come, especially if this happens in August. If we have an outage in August, people could come and potentially have access to air conditioning where they might not have that at their house, right? So that's another community benefit that I think is a hopefully will never happen, but is a great thing to have if it does. And then lastly, there are definitely environmental benefits to the microgrid. The electricity that we're generating on campus is significantly cleaner than the grid. And so that's obviously an important thing that we want to demonstrate, that we're good stewards of the environment as well.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It was excellent. Good overview. And obviously looking back, a lot of success in a lot of areas. But Bracken, you and I touched on our last call a little bit about, a lot of people watching this pod who may actually be rolling up their sleeves or thinking about, either, again, the Gallaudet project was large. So the fact that you guys could pull this off should be a model for others. But, a lot of human beings involved, a lot of fear, budgeting, regulatory, red tape. You and I even touched on good old-fashioned project management as a toolkit to kind of navigate some of the steps and the gating as the project went along.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating case study, and I think it's a really important project nationally. But there's a story behind the story. If you think about it, a microgrid makes tremendous sense. It's economically efficient. It's an intelligent way to organize your capital spend. You're de-risking utility costs over time. You're creating an environmental sustainability benefit and a reliability and resilience benefit at the same time. But to move into that capital investment, there's a lot of risk. You said it yourself. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of culture change. And getting people to do things differently is challenging, and there's not a lot of upside if you do it and get it wrong. There's a well-worn path on how to build an energy project, and it involves low capital spend, high operating cost, and a lot of long-term structural and environmental risk, but you're not penalized for that. And so what we had with Gallaudet, and I can't give enough credit to Dave for coming in and having a personal vision and commitment to kind of chip away. And he was a very, very demanding and rigorous analyst of the project. He really needed it to be right, but he asked a whole set of questions that built one on the next. So what we did, there was always an off-ramp. When we first came and talked to him, it was like, is there a project here? Is that a possibility? Tell me. We did a very small, narrow engagement, and we said, yeah, conceptually, there's a really good project here. And then the next question was, okay, let's dig a little deeper. How could it be economically efficient? What would some of those finances look like? What would the technology mix be? How would we contract it and get someone to come and build it? So it was this kind of incremental buildup, each time realizing, yeah, there are no showstoppers here. We really could do it. And so each time Dave could go and talk to the administration, because their responsibility is to, educate the deaf and the hard of hearing. It's a very, very important educational mandate and a social equity mandate, and they're not going to compromise that on a sustainability goal, but they do have to spend year over year considerable amount on energy and infrastructure and physical plant. Dave also mentioned a key piece was avoided capital costs. They needed new roofs. They were running to the end of the life of some electrical chillers. There was a whole set of capital investments that we could look at over the life of a project and say, yeah, this really makes business sense. And he could take it to the board, to the administration, and advocate for it. So it was really, the story behind the story is, how come Gallaudet was able to do something that makes tremendous sense, but often other things get in the way? And it was the process of taking them out of the way. And in Washington, D.C., we had an incredible group of partners. We had a willing local government. We first got introduced because of work we were doing with the Washington, D.C. government, because they wanted to be on the leading edge of clean energy and resilient local infrastructure. Incredible university vision about wanting to be sustainability leaders, really driven by the student body and the faculty. Very, very committed. But even the utility, we ended up working really closely with the utility to figure out how they would do accounting. We basically had to put a large energy infrastructure behind the meter at the university and bring the whole load of the university down, but figure out how to get credit for that on the energy bills. So, I mean, it was a fascinating project, and we had to think through all of these things. And I think the real gift that that kind of Dave brought to the project management of it was keeping a really high bar for meeting our goals, but incrementally being patient to figure out how we could get there. So we were always trying to figure out, can we get to yes? And each time we did. And one thing before I hand it back, I want to say,
Yeah.
he mentioned the RFP, the RFQ, sort of request for qualifications, and then an RFP project. We were incredibly fortunate to end up with Scale as an execution partner. And when we went out with an RFQ, we had no idea if anyone would have any interest in this project. And I think we got like 25 responses from world-class global engineering firms, like household name companies were coming in because they were really fascinated at the opportunity to do a truly islandable microgrid in an active utility environment on the network. And we ended up with Scale because they had deep experience with cogeneration and with really optimizing these projects in practice. They were also small enough so we felt like we could be in serious design conversation and financial conversation with the senior leadership. It was a project where they were taking a real risk and making a commitment. And so they had skin in the game too, alongside Gallaudet, and they were true partners. And I don't think this would have worked for the university if they, because part of what was happening was the university was saying, we want to run a facility, but we aren't energy utility, that's not our expertise to build this. So they needed a deeply trusted partner, hand in glove. I mean, and during this whole time, we had COVID, we've had inflation exploding, we've had really wild changes in utility and energy policy environment. And so the ability to select a partner who had the chops and the patience and was really committed to seeing it through. And so I think the RFP process that landed on the selection of Scale and the whole team they put together was also critical to the success.
Thank you. That sounds like a perfect segue to Spencer.
Yeah, thanks, Bracken. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the critical pieces that Dave and Bracken mentioned is the chronological order of replacing that switchgear in phase one, because what one part of a microgrid that I think is often overlooked is the ability to provide that backup power automatically when there is a utility power outage is based upon the switchgear, right? And so if you have 40-plus-year-old switchgear, then that switchgear does not have most likely the monitoring and the controls, or the ability to control for the microgrid or to island the facility or provide backup power to that facility automatically. So I think the way that the project happened chronologically was replacing the switchgear and updating that in phase one, knowing that phase two would layer on all the controls, the CHP system, the battery, as well as the solar, really laid a great groundwork for the microgrid to be successful, and for us to really kind of commission that last year. and then, as you mentioned, really start the project on January 1st of this year.
So from your perspective, Spencer, is this one of the biggest projects you guys have done? I mean, you've been around for a while. Everybody knows scale. Is this
Mhm.
kind of the poster child for like, you know, there's a whole range of different size microgrids out there, but is this kind of
Yeah.
like the gold standard or the biggest one you guys have done?
Yeah, no, I mean, we obviously love the Gallaudet microgrid, the sophistication that it has, the complexity that it involves, but also how working with Gallaudet and Urban Ingenuity as partners to really, like I said, make it as efficient as possible. But because of that complexity, yeah, for a behind the meter microgrid, it is definitely on the more complex side for sure, and really one of the more exciting microgrids that I've certainly in scale been a part of, with the CHPs, the battery, as well as solar.
So among you, I don't know who's got the playbook now. I mean, you guys have been there, done that. You've documented it. It's been stress tested. You got the best practices and lessons learned, and so now anybody can call up one of you guys and say, "Okay, great, thanks so much for going through that harrowing experience. I'll take the playbook. Thank you very much." I mean, are you at that kind of a level now, or who wants to chime in on that? I mean, is it replicable or is it still like a nightmare?
I
David,
I
I
guess
mean, or Brack,
I could
yeah,
go.
Spencer, go for it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess I'll go first. My 2 cents. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think we definitely have a great playbook for right how to design, implement, and then operate. Right, we have a lot of lessons learned for sure from 7 years to date that we can implement. Right, there's always differences and variables and other factors that are going to be nuanced for every project. But I would say at a high level for the kind of the general playbook, we have a lot of great lessons learned that we can apply to many other projects.
Excellent. And it
And
sounded like, again, starting in Washington, D.C., you kind of had a supportive environment, regulatory commissioners and so forth. Is that still the X factor? I mean, is the other 90% of that kind of stuff you guys have kind of nailed? And that's, I mean, town by town, state by state, is that still the X factor? That kind of local, regulation, administration, that stuff? And Brack, I think you could speak to that.
Sure, happy to. Um, there is a few pieces. So the regulatory environment is critically important. An optimized microgrid is part of the efficiency is that you are generating electricity and then you're using the waste heat to produce building heating and cooling. So you're getting two benefits off of any fossil fuels that you're combusting, and then you're layering in renewables, battery storage, and deep energy efficiency so that you're getting baseload energy, but you're dramatically compressing the carbon footprint, and you have this incredible reliability and resilience. Historically, we regulate the sale of electricity very differently from heating and cooling buildings. So you've got to understand how to work within the utility regulatory environment. And that is one place that these really innovative projects can be, significant barriers can be encountered in getting them built. A lot of times they make tremendous economic sense, but the benefits are shared across multiple parties. So one of the key things about the Gallaudet microgrid is that there is a central party, and they have a long-term capital commitment. So, really building around a campus scale microgrid helps a great deal. Multi-user microgrids where you're selling a little bit to multiple parties are challenging. One of the things that we built into the Gallaudet design is that it could serve adjacent properties with electricity, with heating and cooling, with hot water. Um, but we designed it so that those things are add-ons, and we have a core project that works, where we understand the financials, we understand who's paying, we understand the revenue. There are other markets like being paid for ancillary services. We could use the battery storage to provide reliability into the PJM, the regional grid manager. But there are policy barriers too. This is behind the meter. They don't want us to export more battery services than we consume. They're used to looking at single facilities rather than seeing it as an asset on the grid. So I think the thing that is incredibly replicable here is that we focused on a project we could build today, and we didn't design out all of these broader opportunities for spin-off benefits so that the project can continue to grow as we push the policy environment and push the regulatory environment and the financial opportunities.
Excellent. Thank you. And we can wrap it up shortly. So now going forward, David, running the grid. I mean, you guys, I'm sure you've had a lot of time to, fine tune everybody's roles and how many warm bodies you need to kind of keep things rolling. Can you give me kind of what's the team look like now that you're kind of up and running? And,
Yeah.
is it 6 people? Is it 16 people? Just a little bit about, what does it take now to keep the ball moving?
Right. So yeah, I mean, as from pretty much the beginning, right, when we were thinking about this project, we knew like we really wanted to kind of whoever we partnered with was going to, if not own the thing, at the very least, they were going to operate this microgrid for some amount of time, right? And so Scale is a great partner from the development side, but also on the operating side, right? So we have a long-term operating agreement with Scale, so that they are operating the most of the basically all of the microgrid equipment. So the combined heat and power, the battery, the solar, right? All of that is being managed by Scale Microgrids. And as Spencer said, I mean, they do a lot of that remotely, right? Which is nice. They have the ability to kind of look into our system from their central network operations center, and so that's that allows Scale to provide us with a good price, a decent price on operating and maintaining this equipment, right? But yeah, and I think just to as far as kind of the roadmap, the first year, as could be expected, right? The first year of operating, which we're just sort of entering sort of the fourth quarter of the first year. There are certainly things that came up, right? Certainly hiccups, things that we're finding, which is, I think, to be expected in any system, especially one of this complexity. I mean, just we could spend like a day just talking about the complexity of the controls, right, for this thing.
Right.
So, that's to be expected, right? And I think that's one of the lessons learned. I think when you're doing a pro forma for a project like this, you maybe don't discount the first year maybe as much as you maybe should.
Sure.
With that understanding that there will be things that happen. But at the same time, you also maybe miss some things at pro forma, like energy costs are a heck of a lot more than we thought they were going to be at this time, right? So,
Right.
so there's things that kind of balance each other out. So I mean, yeah, I think going forward, we're looking to make improvements to once again drive efficiency, drive reliability, look at how can the microgrid. I think one thing that I really didn't I think I consider, but not as much, is just the sort of all the different options that having a microgrid opens, right? Bracken mentioned the battery, right? The battery has a ton of different things that we can do with it going forward, both from participating in the ancillary market and getting revenue, and also things on site to reduce our peak load and all kinds of interesting things that we can do with that I think are just going to continue to evolve as the utility landscape becomes more constrained. But also the microgrid allows us to look at other things like chilled water storage, right? Where that allows us to basically create chilled water at night when we have lesser demand for electricity on other parts of the campus, and then use that chilled water during the day, right? And so once again, to kind of flatten our load, if you will, so we can better utilize the microgrid. So those kind of things wasn't an option for the microgrid, and that opens up a whole bunch of things. So I think that's something going forward that Scale will work with us to figure out kind of what's possible and see what makes the most sense.
Awesome. The possibilities are unlimited, sounds like. Well, thank you, gentlemen. This is fascinating. I mean, we could easily go for another half hour, if not another hour. David, good. Thank you very much. Bracken, thank you for your time and your input and your wealth of experience and knowledge. And Spencer, thanks for jumping in. Scale Microgrids is doing great work, and I appreciate your joining as well. And thank you to everybody else who downloaded this podcast. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, and thank you for your time, and wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you.